Hey, what's the buzz? And tell me what's happening. This is PyroManiacMo, and I've got another fantasy football talk for you today. I am connected with a Google Hangout with my good friend and compadre, Matt Harrison. Matthew, how are you, sir?
Good. How are you doing, Mo?
I'm doing well, and I'd just like to thank you. I think you were one of my first interviews, and now this is the third interview. My peer over at Pyro, he does something called the Golden Sombrero. So if somebody gets 3 mentions during the year, he kind of does a write-up about that. So I guess you are my Golden Chalupa. I don't know. You're my golden boy, regardless, for putting up with me for 3 times. So I certainly appreciate it.
I'm just a hoe for Mo.
That is right. I love it. And ladies and gentlemen, you can follow me on Twitter at PyroManiacMo, and Matt can be found on Twitter at Explosive Output. That is EXPLOSIVEOUTPUT. And Matt is, of course, the writer and digital experience manager over at League Safe and League Safe Post. Now, in season, he can be heard on the nation's longest running fantasy football radio show entitled Fantasy Football Weekly. You can also hear his take on fantasy from another League Safe podcast, Fantasy Football Almost Daily. So I know we've done this before, but hopefully Pyromaniac is grabbing new earbuds daily. And for those new listeners out there, why don't you explain to our crowd what you boys are doing over at League Safe, and if anything is new, kind of plug us in with what the company is about.
League Safe is kind of, for lack of a better term, kind of a PayPal for fantasy leagues. We kind of make sure that each fantasy league has their payments paid in on time. By doing reminders and such things like that. And then at the end of the season, commissioner clicks a few buttons and money is sent to the accounts of the winners, and then they can log in and choose their withdrawal method. We got some free deposit options and some free withdrawal options. We got a couple premium options that cost a little bit of money, but we're a business, so we're in it to try to pay my salary and everything like that. So
show enough.
But yeah, lot of good features, majority approval. We got some security features in place. So if you're playing online with some people you don't know, we try to make sure that the commissioner's not stealing any of the money or something like that. You're getting signed up for bad leagues or anything like that. If you're using one of the other sites out there, they can kind of just take your money. In fact, they encourage the commissioners to withdraw the money. We're one of the few sites that say, nope, that money has to stay in at League Safe. It's going to be locked down all season. It's going to be safe. And at the end of the year, everybody should have a say in how that goes. And it usually works out pretty great. So lot of success. Been in it for, I think the company's been going for 8 years now. I've been here for almost 4. So yeah, it's been good here. We started Safe Leagues last year, which is our contest leagues that we run, and that was pretty successful for our first go around. Got somewhere near 50 leagues, I believe, that we started running, and I think about 25 of those were Empire leagues. So if you're looking to join an Empire league, which I think we're going to talk about later in this interview, and you don't have 11 or 9 friends that want to do it with you, Safe Leagues is a good place to look if you want to play in an Empire format, and we have open spots for people to join.
Yeah, we're going to definitely talk about that because we at Pyro really love the idea and perhaps might get involved, but we'll definitely broach the subject here soon. But before we get there, I mentioned, of course, League Safe, as we've just heard, lives up to its name, making your leagues more safe, especially in this internet age when a lot of times you're playing with guys you don't know. So it just makes it, takes the worry away and, guarantees you're going to get what you put into it. And if you're a winner, you'll get what comes out. Also, I mentioned the Fantasy Football Weekly radio show. Now, this is one of the resources I use. I'm a regular listener. You guys do a fantastic job. For those of us who are unfamiliar, what is the Fantasy Football Weekly show? Who's there? And what do you guys discuss? When can we find you?
We're on Saturday mornings, starting the first Saturday in August and going through week 16. We don't do week 17 because we have a strong stance against any fantasy being played in week 17.
Damn right.
Yeah, we've been on for 21 years on KFAN 100.3 FM in Minneapolis. You can find that on iHeartRadio. You can also find the Fantasy Football Weekly channel on iHeartRadio. So if you got that app on your phone, click Fantasy Football Weekly. You'll find all of our podcasts on there. You can listen back or you can listen live when we're on Saturday mornings. A lot of our callers that call into the show from around the country. I know there's a guy from Michigan who basically calls every week. We get calls from Australia, like Florida, just everywhere. So it's kind of a show that's taken a life of its own, and it's doing pretty well. Paul Charchian is the host of the show. He's been hosting it for, I think, 20 of the 21 years. And then it's me, Christian Peterson from League Safe, John Tuvey from The Huddle, and Brian Johnson, also from League Safe, who do kind of a rotation, the four of us, for 2 spots every week. So number 2 and number 3 are the rotation of the 4 of us. So it's a lot of prep and study work every week. So it's nice that we don't have to do it every single week. So we get a couple weeks off in there and stuff like that. But it's pretty fun. A lot of us have kind of been in the same office for a long time, and 2V we know from our days at Fanball. So it's mostly just like a whole bunch of guys who are knowledgeable about fantasy, sitting around cracking stupid puns and jokes about parts of the brain and that kind of thing. And we have a good time doing it.
Yeah, here when I do these fantasy football talks, I'm trying to open up the fantasy world for the Pyromaniacs. And so we're talking to a lot of people, and I've talked to John Tuvey on this, but that resource, Fantasy Football Weekly, the show is literally one of my favorites. I listen to you guys every week. I get a lot of my insight, and I'm always tweaking my lineups last minute based on some of the stuff that you guys say. So Pyromaniacs, give it a listen. It's really a great show, and it's one of my top shows that I would recommend to people. So that's essentially leading into my next question. I just kind of peeled back the curtain and told folks, hey, this is a resource that I listen to with regularity. I love it. That's one of the things we try to do at Pyro, is let listeners know a little bit about some of the resources we go to. The old adage in the Bible, teach a man to fish rather than feed him for a day. So on that token, what's a resource that you can toss out to listeners, maybe a website or a data point or something that you find really fantasy important, a regular thing that you go to?
Well, of course, you can find us at League Safe Post. We do some stuff every week for football on League Safe Post. Not as much as we used to, but we might be ramping that up again this fall and making it a little bit more interesting. More on that later. But I use FF Today, Fantasy Football Today, for a lot of stats. It's easy, it's clean. You can find basically any stat you want, and that's a nice one to have. Football Outsiders I got really into this year with their DVOA statistics. If you're looking for a guy who you need to just plug and play in a lineup, like your third wide receiver, you don't know who you're going to play because you got a couple bye week issues. You go look at Football Outsiders DVOA statistics, and you can tend to find some interesting matchups that maybe you can exploit. That's 2 of them. The Pro Football Reference Play Index is fun if you're looking up really weird statistics, stuff that you want to spout off on a podcast or a radio station. That's a good place to go. You can find really odd statistics there. So yeah, those are a handful that I tend to use pretty often.
Yeah, I second all of those, especially the the DVOA from Football Outsiders, and I like when you can check the defense versus type of receiver. So, for example, Indiana against wide receiver number 1, they were rated 11th versus number 2, but other wide receivers rated 30th. So you might be able to find those little stats to take advantage of. So all good references there that you tossed out. Now, we kind of hinted around this earlier. But, I'm a Dynasty player. And one of the reasons folks love Dynasty, and perhaps Pyros, we're doing this all year round, and you can get your fantasy football fix all year round. You need to be up on the current signings, what's going on at the combine, rookie draft, free agency transactions. You got to be up on all that, and Dynasty leagues really cater to knowing what's going on. Dynasty owners need to keep appraised of these situations, making trades, doing waiver wire, all that stuff. However, I'm finding this out in a regular Dynasty league I'm in. I think we're in the 5th year, and I'm still in it, and there's many that are, but several owners are running out of gas, and when that happens, the league just kind of starts to deteriorate. It's not nearly as fun for everyone else. They're not trading. They're not responding to emails. And it just sort of, it makes it less fun for everybody. Even though I'm still in it, other guys are really bringing it down. And you guys kind of have the answer, I think, with what you alluded to earlier, and that's Empire League. So why don't you tell us what an Empire League is?
So the gist of the Empire League is it's like a Dynasty League. You hold over all players. But the main difference is the first player to win the league 2 years in a row wins the Empire Pot, which I'll get into in a second, and it ends the league. It gives a definitive ending to a Dynasty League, which Dynasty Leagues by default really don't have a definitive ending, and they can go on forever. Some people are just going to lose interest, and eventually it'll fall apart, or enough people will be like, I just don't want to play anymore. I'm gonna leave, and somebody else comes in and they get a crappy team, and it's just no fun trying to rebuild a crappy team for 4 or 5 years and throwing money down the toilet while you're doing that. So the Empire League, what we do is we take in a standard $100 entry fee, $50 would go into this year's pot, and $50 would go into the Empire Pot. So you have a constant rolling pool of money. So in a let's just give an example that's easy math. For instance, in a 10-team league at $100 entry fee, there's $1,000 in the pot.
I like easy math. It's right up my alley.
So 500 would go out to the first, second, third place that year, and 500 would be put away in the Empire Pot, as 500 would in year 2, as 500 would in year 3, 4. So by the end of year 4, you got $2,000 in your Empire League pot. And if a guy wins it in year 3 and year 4, he gets the first place prize for that year, but he would also win that $2,000 in the Empire pot. And so it makes a kind of a big prize in a small time in a small time entry fee. So it's one of the things that we like. One of our other rules that we have to kind of avoid collusion in our current Empire League that we just finished, I believe, year 4 on, is that the current champion cannot make trades the following season. Ooh. So I was the champion in year 3, and I'm kind of known in our league as one of the guys who throws out a lot of trade offers. Some call me a trade troll, but sure. I throw out a lot and I have fun with it, and usually sparks some conversations, and it's good. But not having the ability to trade was very difficult, and I ended up taking 3rd this year. I had a good team, but like a lot of people, injuries just kind of took me out of it. But it makes it difficult, and one of the reasons we put that rule in place is to kind of avoid collusion. If the pot gets to, maybe we get 10, 15 years into it, and the pot's looking close to $10,000 or something like that for the Empire Pot, that's probably enough for a guy to go, Mr. Champion guy, right? I don't mind getting you this number 1 running back and this wide receiver, my only 2 good players on my team, if you happen to shoot me a $2,000 cut when you win the championship this year. So we decided to nip that in the bud right away. And once you win the championship, you got a year of no trading. So it makes it difficult. Yeah,
I like it. And one thing I really like about it is it keeps everyone with a vested interest. Even if your team is kind of tanking, you can turn an organization around in a couple of years. And if, like you say, if you're 15 years into it, boy, is there some incentive to turn your organization around. And also,
the other thing is you want to plan to win it twice, 3 or 4 years down the road. Yeah. A lot of the stuff that we do on Empire Leagues, Christian Peterson makes a fantastic Empire League trade value chart. It gives everybody a numerical value, every player in the league. And his is based off winning the league in year 3 and year 4, like winning it 3 or 4 years from now. So these are the players you should target now to try to win, not next year, not the year after that, but let that pot grow a little bit, and you keep building and building and building and finding the right pieces here and there. But forecast the guys who are going to be good for you for a long time. Guys like Cam Newton and Aaron Rodgers and Andrew Luck rank very highly in that. Running backs don't get as much credit because their careers are just that much shorter than the other positions. And so it's a lot of heavy quarterback, wide receiver, and tight end kind of stuff in there.
Yeah, and for Pyro Maniacs out there, I will be tweeting out some links that you could follow. I'm sure you can get information on League Safe and League Safe Post as well. So speaking of, now we're kind of chatting Dynasty and Empire Leagues. Now is often kind of the time where people are maybe footballed out, and depending on your calendar when you can make transactions or not, but around this time when transactions are open, you can make some really important grabs. I've been looking, I tucked away a Keem Hunt a little while ago, but a lot of people talking about Eric Rodgers, the Calgary Stampeder, who just got signed, I believe, by San Francisco. Had some pretty impressive numbers up there last season, 87 catches, almost 1,500 yards, a little over 1,400 yards, 10 TDs. A lot of guys talking about him, but there's even guys that we didn't see. Perriman, we didn't see. White, now chances are they're already taken. But a lot of names being tossed out there. Is there anybody you've got as a Dynasty veteran? Is there anybody you are kind of looking to pick up or have your eye on at this time?
Well, one of the things that in the only Dynasty league I actually play in is the Empire League that I'm in, and we don't allow pickups at this time of year. So it's something you can do. Everybody will be available at draft time, and I think that's kind of a good way to go after week 16. And you can make trades, but I don't think that you should be able to pick up guys at this point in the season. But beyond that little thing, there are a few guys that were rookies last year that kind of caught my eye near the end of the year, and I think would be good pickups, good grabs. Jay Ajayi in Miami. He got a little bit of run at the end of the season after dealing with a lot of injuries. Lamar Miller is a free agent there, and Lamar Miller was so misused in Miami. It would not surprise me if he went on to greener pastures and signed somewhere else and tried to make it go. He was one of the best running backs in the league per touch, but just didn't get enough work down there. No. So Ajayi could be sitting on a possible timeshare as a starter, or maybe even a little bit more. Max Williams in Baltimore. Rookie tight ends tend to do next to nothing, but Max Williams, being from Minnesota, I watched this guy play in college, and he was an absolute beast. But it usually takes tight ends about a year to figure it out. We saw Jimmy Graham really pop up in year 2. We've seen a lot of tight ends in the past. Travis Kelce looked better in year 2 than year 1. So these are some guys that like Max Williams, I think, is a guy that you could probably grab onto now, because I don't think a lot of people stashed him away, and could put up some pretty good numbers for you.
Yeah, another tight end I'm kind of keeping my eyes on is Clive Walford over in Oakland.
Yeah, he had a good year at the end of the year there.
Yeah, and
Derek Carr looks really good.
Yeah, he does. He's moving up. Very accurate passer. Doesn't throw a lot of INTs. And we talk to David T. Thomas often. He's an NFL scout, and he sends me his scouting reports. And Walford was one of the guys he really liked. And like you said, a lot of times tight ends don't, fit in. Really, it doesn't click for him until a couple years in the league. He's the guy I'm liking. Now, you guys. Famous for another thing. So you got the Empire League under your belt and you can put on your resume, but also Paul Chargian, I think, has kind of coined the term do the opposite. Many folks might refer to it as upside down drafting, give it a name. I'm sure there's other things, but give us a brief refresher here. We at Pyro have talked about it and often reference you or Chargian with this draft philosophy. Break it down for us. What is do the opposite draft philosophy?
Yeah, Church has been kind of putting forth the do the opposite draft strategy for, God, over a decade at least. It was probably early 2000s when he started doing it. In this last year, it's been kind of funny how it started to gain steam as the zero running back theory and stuff like that.
Right.
But this is something that we've been spouting for over a decade, and it's basically, while everybody else is gobbling up running backs in your league, you go and you spend your first 4 or 5 rounds picking up the best wide receivers, tight ends, and maybe even a quarterback, and have those positions locked down as some of the top guys in the league at your position. So you're playing from strength there. And then after about the 5th round, you take numerous running backs, just every running back you can find. You just best available running back. And a lot of them at this time are going to be the guys who have, question marks, like we don't know if they're going to be, a full-time runner, they're going to be a half-time runner. Guys like LeGarrette Blount was a good example this year. Guys who we didn't quite know their role. D'Angelo Williams would have fit into that mold. But you can find a whole bunch of kind of middle-of-the-road running backs or rookie running backs that aren't proven, or second-year running backs who are going to finally get a little bit more share. And it tends to work out a lot more because, as you saw in 2015, this was the year of the running back injury. And the guys at the end of the season that were leading teams into the playoffs, in a championship game, I think I started Bilal Powell and D'Angelo Williams as my starting running backs. And those were 2 guys that, D'Angelo you might have had at the beginning of the year, but you were going, he's a 2-week fill-in until Le'Veon gets back. Yeah. But, you're looking at these guys and going, well, you got to find different aspects and different people to go at. And if you're spending your first 2 draft picks on Jamal Charles and DeMarco Murray this last year, you kind of wasted 2 draft picks if you were doing it, unfortunately. So many running backs got dinged up. Arian Foster, Le'Veon Bell, Matt Forte missed some games. Charles, it's just a ton. So it's really hard to it really just speaks for itself. Look at the running backs that got hurt at the end of last year, and look at who ended up doing well. Eddie Lacy was the 3rd overall pick in MFL's ADP last year, and he was awful. And just it's a tough thing to stomach, losing your first 2 draft picks. So I have a feeling more people are going to start flexing to do the opposite more, and do the opposite might not mean do the opposite anymore. It might just mean fantasy is grabbing your best wide receivers now.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you. On a recent podcast when I did guested on the Pyromaniac Heavy, I actually was in Chicago with the boys, and we were talking about this very thing. We kind of did an audit, and we were looking at our past drafts. This year I noticed, I think the first 9 running backs taken in my high school league, I want to say there was roughly about 6 had major, injury issues or letdowns, like in Eddie Lacy. And
well, I got an ADP pulled up right here. I'll tell you who the top running backs were. Just one second. But it was Le'Veon Bell was the number 1 running back off the board. Eddie Lacy, Adrian Peterson, who had a pretty good year.
Yep.
Jamal Charles, injured. Marshawn Lynch, injured. Matt Forte, a couple games. C.J. Anderson was a complete bust. DeMarco Murray, also a bust. Jeremy Hill, pretty much a bust for where you were drafting him. LaShawn McCoy was actually pretty good considering, but he missed a few games. Justin Forsett, bust. Lamar Miller, he would have been absolutely fantastic if they would have fed him the ball. The 13th running back off the board was Melvin Gordon. He didn't score a touchdown all year. Mark Ingram was gone from the playoffs. Frank Gore was terrible. Carlos Hyde looked good in week 1, but was terrible. Todd Gurley, you had to win, and you lost him at the end of the season. Alfred Morris. This is the order of running backs. Right. I went through the first 18, and really one of those guys lived up to his draft position this year.
Right.
It was absolutely brutal.
Out of the names you were mentioning, I jotted down AP, certainly, Forte, arguably, and just my reaction, my feelings when you listed the names. AP, Forte, McCoy, Miller. I liked Gurley, but that was it. And a lot of those are question marks. Now,
Yeah.
I think, like you kind of alluded to, obviously, Matt, you and I aren't the only ones to notice this. So next year, when perhaps we've seen wide receiver really take a huge leap forward and it's been trending that way. So maybe next year is kind of the draft of the wide receiver. Maybe people are not apt to load up on running backs first. So if that's the case, if guys next year are drafting wide receivers higher, earlier, more often, does do the opposite then mean literally do the opposite? If everyone's drafting wide receiver, do you think do the opposite next year would be then, all right, go towards running back?
We either call that undo the opposite or do the opposite of the opposite. But yeah, it could be. It could be a situation where so many people are off Le'Veon Bell that he's there at the tail end of the first round, and you just look at him and go, well, if this guy stays healthy, he's an absolute difference maker, and I got to take him. If everybody's filling up on Odell Beckham, Julio Jones, Des Bryant, Rob Gronkowski, those kind of guys, well, yeah, then you have to look and see what's available and what can give you positional differentiation and make you better. So, yeah, I think that personally, I prefer auctions in my case because it gives you kind of a truer value. But if you're still doing a snake draft, things could change quite a bit, and if you're at the tail end of that first round, you could see yourself going in about 7 different directions. It could be, I'm gonna try to grab Gronk if he's still there. Maybe you're a true believer in Cam Newton. Maybe you're looking at running back to start because the value is just there. So you kind of have to be open if you're in the back end of the draft to flex yourself around and change your strategy halfway through. You can't go in with a solid strategy, I don't think, in 2016.
That's exactly right. You know, we're kind of starting our first draft of our draft kit and writing some manifestos and stuff like that. 2 of the tenets I think will be high on mine is certainly react to the draft. It's a fluid thing. Don't go in with one set plan because you just never know. And draft the best talent available. You know, best talent available is always going to help you in the long run, whether it's stacking your team, making trades, but I don't think you can go wrong with best talent available and reacting to what's in front of you.
One of the things we try to instill in people, and we do a lot of preseason shows for Fantasy Football Weekly. We do a big event called Fantasy Football Training Camp every year where we filled up a casino stage showroom this year, and it was pretty fun. And you know, a couple thousand people watching us and doing the live radio show, and then we did kind of a deep dive on all the PowerPoints and stuff that we can't really explain on the radio. But one of the things that we try to tell people when they're doing a draft is your first 2 rounds and maybe even your first 3 rounds, you draft for safety. You draft the guy that has the lowest downside possible. So that tends to steer you away from running backs a lot. But you know, guys who are kind of Iron Men like Adrian Peterson, for instance, he's still pretty safe kind of a player. So you draft for safety in rounds 1, 2, maybe 3, and then you draft for risk after that. You draft for the crazy upside, and you draft the guys that you're going to pick out in rounds 4, 5, 6, 7 that are either going to make or break your team. And that's why do the opposite works so well, because you can draft a safe Odell Beckham or a safe Antonio Brown in the first couple of rounds, and then you can start getting a little silly with it and grab Deion Lewis and grab a Lamar Miller who might be in a new situation next year, and some of the other guys that are available. Doug Martin's going to probably be in a new spot next year. So you kind of start grabbing the guys who have a little bit of higher upside but lower downside, and then you can see if you hit on a few of those, and if you got your 2 safe guys and then you hit on 2 or 3 of your next couple of picks, you got a good chance to win.
Okay, so let's kind of stick with that. drafting safety, doing the opposite.
Mhm.
So let's just say, nothing crazy happens and not everybody is doing the opposite. So it's
So a
just
traditional draft.
traditional draft.
Yeah.
You're drafting for safety. Now, safe, that word is, I think, a relative term. I was looking back on some write-ups, and that, I kid you not, that adjective was used with Lacey last year, and his ADP was very high. He fluctuated, and to be honest, I think his yards per carry 4.1, 4.5, and it was 4.1 again this year. But a lot of guys said they liked Lacey because they felt he was safe. In your book, in those first couple drafts, in an average draft, you're doing the opposite. Who are some safe guys? Who are some of these guys that you would pick in rounds 1 through 3, or guys you're at least kind of targeting or would be on your list?
I think you got to go with Gronk number one. And even though Gronk is probably going to miss 1 or 2 games a year, Rob Gronkowski still is such a difference maker at his position that he puts you in such a good spot. I mean, he can miss 2 games and he can still lead the league in touchdowns. And that's a guy that if I'm picking first overall in a draft, I'm looking long and hard at Rob Gronkowski and going, this is a guy I can grab him. He can be my tight end. I don't have to worry about tight end in any other rounds. I can grab 2 of my favorite wide receivers in rounds 2 and 3. Hopefully get 2 top 10 guys. And then from there, you can kind of just move on and filter in a whole bunch of running backs. But, I mean, there's some other guys that at the wide receiver position I think are pretty safe. Antonio Brown comes to mind, probably has the lowest floor of any player week to week in the NFL. He's going to get you 8 catches and 80 yards just about every week. If you're in a PPR league, that's money in the bank right there. Because then he's also going to have those weeks where he catches 20 balls for 180 yards and a touchdown or 2. So he's pretty amazing. Odell Beckham's fun to have because he can go off and have 2-3 touchdown games at any time, and he's just such a focal point in that offense.
With Odell, as a Lions fan, I just view him different now because, of course, we had the Megatron news. He might be retiring. We lost Barry early. Now we might lose Megatron early, and I can't help but go back to the draft when we picked Eric Ebron, and Odell was still on the board. We took Ebron, and it's just when I hear his name, I just think what could have been, and now we're losing more. So it's just a tender issue for me. Thanks for helping me work this out. I think this is healthy. This is healthy.
Man, with Megatron too.
Yeah.
Don't the Lions just go to him and go, we'll trade you to wherever you want. Just don't retire. Like, we got to get something for you. Like, you want to go to New England, we'll trade you for a 6th round pick or something like that. You want a chance to win a title, we'll go.
Absolutely. And think about where they were not too long ago. People were kind of saying, oh, Megatron's doing this for his own personal gain to try to get some money out of it. And they were talking about maybe they went from asking him to reduce his salary to now he's got them over a barrel. The situation has totally flipped. So, you think they need to get something out of it. If he just rides off into the sunset, that is a detrimental hit to the way you're building a team. I
think he is consistently hurt too, and probably more than people know. He hasn't played well, like really well up to his standards in probably 2.5 years. So it's just been ankle injury after ankle injury, and I don't think he can get healthy. So I think that's one of the things that's driving him. He's looking at that Lions squad and going, we're not going to win a Super Bowl in the next 2 or 3 years. My ankles aren't going to get better. I'm not going to get healthier. I'm not going to get younger. So I basically have a window of 2, 3, 4 years maybe that he can win a Super Bowl, and it's going to be painful for him to do it if he can. And I think he's going, do I care that much if I'm going to just sit around here and not win? Right. I think I'd rather go sip a Mai Tai on the beach.
And that's the thing. One, he's always been the type of player. I see him hit the ground a lot. He kind of sacrifices his body. He's always in this acrobatic aerial catch. So a lot of wear and tear on the body. And he's the type of player, he's never in the news. He keeps to himself, but he doesn't eat drink and breathe football like some other guys do. And I think if he's not going to be the ultimate top at his position, which chances are he's probably not there anymore, I don't think he really has the drive to push it like a Manning or someone. I think he's serious and quite content to ride off into the sunset. But like you say, the Lions got to get something from him.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's been early and this is an overreaction to the season. And, I never really put too much stock in what players say this quick after a season. But you never know. He's not a traditional type player.
Sure.
We'll have to see. Now, we kind of did a lot of draft philosophy. This has been great. Before we jump into some players while we're on draft philosophy, that you are do the opposite. Are you also then a late round quarterback? Or if you're doing the opposite, does that perhaps mean you're looking at quarterback early when maybe other guys aren't? Where do you stand on late round QB?
Well, the guy I was telling everybody to draft in 2015 as a late round quarterback is a guy that you could just plug in for the first 6 weeks because he had an amazing schedule, was Carson Palmer. And that worked out pretty well. I mean, there's guys that you can find in the 11th, 12th, 13th round that don't have super sexy stats, but their stats are close enough to the fun names that you were going to draft higher that it doesn't matter as much. I think that this year the position's going to be deep again, and you could find yourself with a guy like a Derek Carr late in a draft. I think a lot of people are going to be off Drew Brees, even though I believe he led the league in passing yards again. Carson Palmer, after kind of a shabby end of the playoff run, maybe he doesn't get the respect he deserves, and maybe people are just like, he's old. Tony Romo is going to be all but forgotten this year. And Matthew Stafford, if Calvin Johnson does come back, you still got to like Matthew Stafford because he chucks the ball 40 times a game. So there's a lot of guys that you're going to be able to find late. Hey, Eli Manning. Eli Manning is always available late. And Jay Cutler is always available late. Those guys both have great wide receivers. Mm-hmm. And they're going to throw the ball to these wide receivers that you would draft in the first or second round. Somebody's got to get those guys the ball, and somebody's going to get them the points. So I wouldn't mind, waiting and taking either of those guys. Now, that being said, if you're going to do the opposite draft and all of a sudden, you're picking at the tail end of the first round and you get one of the wide receivers you like, maybe you get say an Alshon Jeffrey or something like that late in the first round, or an AJ Green. And all of a sudden you're sitting there and everybody's just gobbling up the wide receivers, and all of a sudden you get to the mid to tail end of round 3 and you're looking and Cam Newton's still there for some reason. And you go, geez, Cam Newton would have been the 6th best running back in the league last year as far as fantasy points. So I'm going to take him and I'm going to roll the dice with him. And that's totally fine. Or if you think, hey, Aaron Rodgers is going to get back to 45 touchdowns this year because Jordy Nelson's back in the fold and Mike McCarthy's back calling plays again, and you're a believer. So you could do that. And if you think you got a guy who sets you apart that's available for you at the quarterback position, you can go ahead and do it. But if it's not that big of a difference maker, I think that you wait on the quarterback position.
Yeah, and, we've talked draft philosophy, so we're going to drop a few names with the last 10 minutes of show we got left here. And some of those names you said, other ones, Kirk Cousins, currently, if we were to draft right now, 12 team, he's going top of the 10th. Tyrod Taylor, back of the 10th. Stafford and Carr and Manning, both going in the 11th. Chargers boy there, Fitzmagic going in the 12th. So I think it certainly behooves you to late. There's just, those other guys score a lot of points, but everybody at the quarterback position scores a lot of points. And it's not just about the guy that you're drafting, but it's also about the guy you're not drafting, right? Yeah. So if I draft Aaron Rodgers early and then a quarterback late, well, who could I have gotten instead of Aaron Rodgers? Because I bet you there's a guy I can draft much later that's going to be pretty close point-wise to what Aaron Rodgers does, but how about those other positions? And I think that's what people forget to look at, is it's not just who you draft, but who else could you have taken instead?
Well, if you can look at the 11th and 12th round, if you're mapping out your draft, and you can say, I'm going to get Eli Manning and Ryan Fitzpatrick, both of those guys in the 11th and 12th round, and I'm going to roll into every week starting the guy who has the better matchup.
Yeah.
I think that if you went into a season like that, you'd probably have a top 8 quarterback mashing those stats together, and I think that's a good way to do it. That means that you can spend your first 10 picks not on quarterback. So if you can look and you can say safely, my league is a league where people don't value some of these quarterbacks late. If it's a 1 quarterback league, or it's a league where not everybody gets a quarterback in the first 5 rounds, I think it's a position you can definitely wait on.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I said, we talked a lot of draft philosophy. I'm here with Matt Harrison from League Safe and League Safe Post. You can follow him on Twitter at Explosive Output. And this is PyroManiacMo. You can follow me at PyroManiacMo on Twitter. And Matt, I heard you say earlier that roughly you're not taking a running back till about the 5th round. So I looked up on Fantasy Football Calculator, and if we were drafting today, now I looked this up a few days ago, but it's still pretty accurate considering where we are in the calendar year. 5th round guys, and I looked up PPR, I looked up 12-team league. So guys that are going in the 5th round, which one of these guys would you target? And let's say you're doing the opposite. You do not have a running back yet.
Okay.
Arian Foster, Carlos Hyde, Jeremy Hill, Jonathan Stewart, CJ Anderson.
And really, I think you can feel comfortable with any of those guys if you're going into a draft at that point. And one of the things you just ask yourself is, who do I think has the best chance of having the blow-up year? Arian Foster's done it in the past. He's been the number 1 running back in fantasy, but it's been quite a few years since he's done that, and he's had injury history. Carlos Hyde's shown just flashes of absolute brilliance in about 2 or 3 games in his career. Other than that, he's been an absolute dud, but he's got the Chip Kelly offense this year, and maybe that changes some things around.
Am I crazy that still allures me? Has Chip proven us that his ideal system doesn't really fit, or is he still something to salivate over? Because Carlos Hyde, who never really intrigued me that much, if you added up his double-digit carries, he really didn't have a great yards per game. He had the 1 great game against Minnesota, but how often are they going to have that game script? Yeah. But all of a sudden, Chip Kelly's coming there, and I'm kind of thinking about Hyde in a different way. Am I crazy to do that?
Well, I penned an article just the other day on League Safe Post projecting where the free agent running backs go in this round of free agency early. And I have Doug Martin going to San Francisco, actually, because I think he would be a really good fit in that Chip Kelly offense. He's kind of a Darren Sproles kind of type, can catch passes out of the backfield. He's from the Bay Area. He grew up in Oakland. And I think that would be a really interesting 1-2 punch for him. Now, if Doug Martin ends up in San Francisco, what does that do to Carlos Hyde? What does that do to Doug Martin? I think you could probably look at what shakes out in the offseason with these guys, and you could kind of see, Carlos Hyde's going to get somebody else in there who's a capable backup. There's just no 2 ways about it. Chip Kelly has always ran more than 1 running back, and Carlos Hyde's not going to be a bell cow back there. So I think that you're going to find somebody else in there helping him out, and he's probably not a 5th round guy if you kind of look at it. But Jeremy Hill could be. He obviously had double-digit touchdowns, one of the few running backs who did. CJ Anderson could be the top running back in Denver because Ronnie Hillman's a free agent this year. Yep. Jonathan Stewart, you never know. Is his career over? Is his career just kind of starting? We don't even know. It seems like he's been here forever. Yeah. Finally gets all the work in a year, and he looks okay. Yep. But I'm just worried that he gets sniped too much at the goal line by Cam Newton and Greg Olsen.
Yeah, and some very big wide receivers, especially Benjamin comes back. They got some real tall, lanky boys that could be some nice.
You mentioned Kelvin Benjamin. Kelvin Benjamin's a guy that I am selling all my shares of if I have right now. Because
why?
there's so much allure to him, and everybody's going to be like, hey, he had 10 touchdowns in Cam's season when Cam wasn't throwing well, and now Cam's throwing great. So the price value on Kelvin Benjamin, I think, is going to be absolutely through the roof going into July and August. And I think that you can kind of name your price for him right now. And I think that what you could get in return for Kelvin Benjamin right now will be absolutely fantastic for a guy who's coming off an injury, coming off a big ACL. And he's not a fast guy. He's kind of a slow plotter, but he's a big-bodied guy, and he's good near the stripe. But we've seen in years past with wide receivers who got a lot of red zone touches and red zone looks, like James Jones, for instance, who had like 12 red zone touchdowns for the Packers 3 or 4 years ago. It's not often repeatable. And I think Devin Funchess is there and has made a name for himself a little bit. Should be better in year 2. Greg Olson's one of the best tight ends in the league. Cam Newton's just really good. There's going to be a lot of touchdowns, but they got to go around to a lot of people in that offense. And I think that you could get a lot for Kelvin Benjamin this offseason.
I like that take. I really like that take. And if anything, one thing I'm going to be doing this year, I think, is pushing more trades and trying to sell high and get out while the getting is good. It can burn you, but boy, sure. I love
it's so easy to just hang on to a guy because he's really good. Yeah. But that's often the best time to sell him. You got to look at this guy and go, is this the high point in his career? And or is this the high point in his fantasy value? And if it is, it's probably time to see what you can get. At least put some feelers out there. You can always say no, but throw some feelers out there and see what you can get in return.
Well, we saw that with a lot of guys this year. Freeman not having the end of the season as he did at the beginning. James Jones, a wide receiver. Saw it from a lot of guys. And I just got to say, you mentioned Doug Martin and Chip Kelly. To quote George Costanza, it moved when I heard those names put together. I like that lethal combination. Now, before I let you go, just I had a bunch of other names here called up for you, but I loved the draft philosophy we were talking, and we kind of got in a little bit tossing some names out running back. A real interesting one I kind of think is either the 6th round or the 7th round running backs. Let me throw some names out here for you. This is the 7th round. Gio Bernard, Darren McFadden, which I am staying away from, but Gio Bernard, Darren McFadden, Amir Abdullah, who I really still think is something there, Matt Jones, Carlos Williams, Bilal Powell. Which guy would you take? Which would you stay away from?
Well, a lot of these guys are going to be in new situations this coming year.
Great.
I know Bilal Powell is a free agent, and Darren McFadden doesn't necessarily have the job locked up in Dallas, but it's worth noting that McFadden was one of, I think, 5 running backs who topped 1,000 yards this year. You might not have known it because all year long it was Joseph Randall's the starter, and he's going to be great behind that Dallas offensive line. And then they brought in Christian Michael, and he's going to be great behind that Dallas offensive line. Everybody was just salivating.
Yeah.
I was one of the few guys at the beginning of the year that said Darren McFadden's going to be the best Dallas running back. And one of the reasons I cited, and maybe it's not that good of a reason, but Jerry Jones is absolutely nuts. He's the new Al Davis in the league, and he is a alumnus of the University of Arkansas. So is Darren McFadden. So is Jimmy Johnson when he hired him. So he tends to stick to his weird good old boys network, and it was very predictable when he brought in McFadden, and it was very predictable that they were going to give him a shot. And it would not surprise me at all if Dallas, drafts a couple of late-round rookie running backs to back up McFadden, and McFadden comes in as the main tailback there in 2016. And people are going to stay away from him, but you really can't argue with the fact that he was one of the few guys in the NFL who had over 1,000 yards. He didn't score a lot, but he got the ball enough. It is a good offensive line, and the offense should be better with Romo back and Des Bryant finally healthy. So McFadden's one of those guys that you're going to be able to get really late in drafts. I think he'll probably be beyond the 7th round by the time we start drafting in July. And I think he's a guy that you could grab and feel okay as him as your 4th or 5th running back on your bench.
Yeah, McFadden, I just looked it up. 4th most rushing yards this season. Darren McFadden. Now, a guy I would like, though, I'm staying away from McFadden, but I would like his whoever is behind him on the depth chart. I don't think McFadden's going to last, and we saw that spot behind the Dallas line can certainly produce some fantasy fruit down the line. So I'm kind of looking at the depth chart and seeing who's backing up McFadden. That might be a guy I would be interested in going for.
Mo, how many games has McFadden missed in the last 2 years?
Yeah, he's more durable in the last 3 years. I realize that.
He's missed 0 games in the last 2 years. He's just a guy who's just kind of coming out late, and he's a name. Hey, if you look at this guy and you just assign him an employee number and don't look at his name, yeah. he's just a guy he's coming in later in life, and he's putting up stupidly okay numbers, and nobody wants to draft him because he's Darren McFadden, and that's a guy that I'll go, fine, you're not going to draft Darren McFadden, I'll take him, and he'll be a bye-week fill-in for me, and he'll be a solid bye-week fill-in, and maybe I get a couple of good games at the beginning of the season. Who knows? Maybe Dallas gets 2 or 3 of the worst running defenses in the first 3 or 4 weeks of the season, and all of a sudden McFadden is one of the 2 or 3 best running backs to start the year. And then maybe you can trade him. So if he's a starting running back and he's got a pulse and he's behind a good offensive line and it's a good offense, I'm going to take it. Doesn't matter his name.
Yeah, but I tell you, on the other side of that coin, how many games did he miss in the early part of his career?
Yeah, he was also running behind maybe one of the worst offensive lines in recent history for the prior 6 or 7 years in Oakland. He had no protection, and he was just getting slaughtered left and right. He's actually in a good spot right now on a good offense, and Dallas should be a team that they think they're primed to go win the Super Bowl next year. They thought they were this year if they could keep healthy, but they think they're ready to do it next year. And
that's the big allure, right? The offensive line, Romo's back. Everybody's going to be paying attention to Dez, all the weapons they've got, and that's the big allure. So I still would prefer, I think, value, second guy there.
You and everybody else who's listening / watching right now is going to go, yeah. I don't care about McFadden, but McFadden's one of those guys that you grab in a boring draft. You grab the most boring, basic guys, and it'll work. He's going to be a part of a playoff fantasy roster next year. I'm telling you that.
I like the call, my friend. I like the call. Now, I know you got to get going, so I'm going to ask you one last thing. I'm going to quote old Amos Milburn in a song that John Lee Hooker made famous, 1 bourbon, 1 scotch, 1 beer. And I'd like you to give me, don't even have to talk too much about him, but just give me 1 breakout, 1 sleeper, 1 bust.
Oh, man. Breaking out, man, I didn't prepare for this one. I didn't get to the end of the question, but
give me one. Any of those? You got either a breakout? Do you have either a sleeper or perhaps a guy that is going to bust? So maybe sleeper or bust is easier.
Well, I think on the bust, just talking about some of the guys that I've talked about already, I think that the bust potential for Kelvin Benjamin is very high. Yeah, re-injury or him just not living up to his ADP that should be probably 1st or 2nd round, maybe 3rd round next year. I think that there's a good chance that he just doesn't deliver all of the touchdowns that you need him to. I think Jay Ajayi is a really, really sneaky pick right now, and I think that he's going to go later in drafts. Maybe the way the offseason shakes out in Miami, they grab somebody else. Maybe one of the guys I predicted going there in my article is Ronnie Hillman going there, rejoining Adam Gase in Miami. Yeah. It could be interesting. Whoever the Miami running back is, the main Miami running back, I like them a lot coming into next year because I think Gase is a good offensive mind, and I think that they got some pretty decent offensive line play down there, and they might be able to get it going. So I think that's a good maybe sleeper. Breaking out, Alshon Jeffrey.
Yeah,
I think they're going to franchise him in Chicago.
Yeah.
And I think he's got, if he can get healthy this offseason and Kevin White comes back and actually plays this year, giving them another option. Eddie Royal just wasn't there this year. And he was just double covered all the time. But I've seen Alshon Jeffrey absolutely kill the Vikings time in and time out in the last few years. And I think that he's a guy who could absolutely take a massive step up this year and be one of those guys who at the end of the year he's a top 3 or 4 wide receiver.
All right. And that's a big name, Pyro. A lot of guys either love him or hate him, and I'm an Alshon lover. I love what I've seen. Great hands, always catches the ball, high points it. So I'm with you on Alshon. I like that call right there. Love the Benjamin call as well. Matt, I know you've been gracious enough to do this 3 times, and we are even running long, so I'm going to let you go, and I really appreciate you coming back on and shooting the fantasy breeze with me.
Yeah, thank you. Anytime.
Absolutely. Once again, Pyromaniacs, this is PyroManiacMo. You can follow me on Twitter at PyroManiacMo, just like it sounds, PyroManiacMo. And that, of course, was Matt Harrison at Explosive Output. You can follow him on Twitter. He can also be found in League Safe and the podcast Fantasy Football Almost Daily, and during the regular season, the Fantasy Football Radio Show, Fantasy Football Weekly. Stay tuned. We will have some more Pyro stuff for you in the coming days, and until then, we will see you on the flip side.